Good evening, everyone. I'm J. Lenora Bressler, and welcome to the September 30, 2017 edition of The Bible Delight in the Details. We are in a multi-session series on overlooked details of the Exodus story. And today I want to focus in on one of the most well-known things about the Exodus narrative, and that is the narrative in chapter 14 of the parting of the Red Sea. And I want to talk about exactly what that Red Sea indicated. How are we to look at it? Well, of course, this area of water was real. I believe it was real. I believe that the Israelites actually passed through this area with water coming up on both sides. They were on dry land in the middle of what should have been covered with water. I believe that that is an actual historical event and an actual geographical location. However, things in the Bible that actually happened also usually have a symbolic and a spiritual context as well. One of the things that a lot of people don't realize, particularly those of us who live in Florida, who have grown up around the sea and water, is that in the ancient world, not just in Israel, but all over the ancient world, water, the sea, represented great danger. And also, particularly in the Bible, nothing really good comes out of the sea. The sea is thought of as a barrier, as a very dangerous place, and in many cases, sin represents the world system, and particularly the sinfulness of the world. You see this over and over, particularly all the way up to Revelation, where the beast and various bad things that are going to happen during that last apocalyptic time period in the history of the earth, they come up out of the sea. And that is generally by conservative scholars, that is understood to be out of the world system, out of the nations, the pagan, so to speak, nations that do not acknowledge the kingship of God. So the fact that the Israelites needed to find a way from their enslavement in Egypt to get over to the promised land, and in order to do that, literally the waters had to be parted for them. That is very symbolic. We are slaves to sin. We are coming out of the spiritual equivalent, if you will, of Egypt, where we have been slaves to sin. We are moving toward the promised land. In our case, of course, the glorification of heaven and becoming more and more like Christ. But until we see him, until we're actually in his presence, we are in a time of sanctification. We are not taken out of this world, but we are, and so we're not taken out of the presence of sin, but we are taken out of the power of sin. And if the water, the sea, represents the world system and sin, isn't this a beautiful object lesson and picture of exactly what happens to the Christian as we continue from our bondage and slavery, getting out of there, moving toward our ultimate glorification in heaven. But in the meantime, God parts the evil and the sin of the world, allows us to be separate from it, holy as God is holy, separate from it, and we can walk on dry land, even as the sin and the world is still around us. It is a glorious picture, and frankly, it's one that I only recently realized. Now, one quick thing. We all know that, or we've all been taught, that the body of water was the Red Sea. But scholarship now indicates that that may very well be a mistake. Not a mistake in the Bible, but a mistake in some later translations of the original language. And really, it should have been Reed Sea. Now, they both exist, and they existed at the time, but here's the difference. The Red Sea would have been possibly not in the most direct way out of Egypt. And we know that Moses had been told by God, get these people out. Time was of the essence. Remember, we said that they ate the Passover meal ready with their sandals on their feet and their staffs in their hand. Because when Pharaoh said go, they needed to get out of Dodge as soon as possible. So it's very unlikely that they would have gone the circuitous, much farther route to the Red Sea. But the Reed Sea was a estuary right off the Mediterranean, right there at the delta, the Egyptian delta, where the land of Goshen, where the Israelites had settled, was. And so it's probably the Reed Sea as opposed to the Red Sea. Now, and also, if that is true, the understanding of how possibly a very strong wind might have done this miraculous thing does make a lot more sense. Now, I know that this bothers some people when a miracle may be able to be explained in a natural way, but I always tell people, please don't feel that way. It doesn't in any way take away from God the glory of this. Because even if there have been some occasions where something similar may have happened at other times, what is the likelihood that a unique and very, very, very rare ecological event would have happened at exactly the moment that the Israelites needed it, and then would end at exactly the moment that would capture the Pharaoh's army and kill them all and drown them all? One last thing. Just remember, for those of us in Florida who feel very comfortable around water, and particularly the beach, ancient peoples, most of them did not know how to swim. As a matter of fact, most people didn't know how to swim. Even sailors did not know how to swim until middle of the 1800s. If you're a historian, or if you read novels from long ago, you may have been struck by how many people drown in shipwrecks, even though the shipwrecks may have been just a few hundred yards off of shore. It's because most people in the ancient world, in the Middle Ages, and even up to modernity, did not know how to swim. So that is another reason why there was this innate fear in ancient peoples of the sea. I'm J. Lenora Bressler. Visit me on the next edition of the Bible, Delight in the Details. Have a marvelous night.